Welcome into the Cubs Recap Podcast, episode number 2 with my friend Gordon Wittenmyer. I'm David Kaplan. Of course, our podcast available right here on our Recap YouTube channel, as well as everywhere audio-wise that you get your podcast. Gordon, good afternoon. We are into spring training games now. So let's start with some nagging injuries that the Cubs are dealing with. You've got Justin Steele said, a little arm fatigue. I should go left wing. Arm fatigue. Wisdom. My groin's a little tight. So where are we?
Dude, they're 3 for 3. Right?
Right.
3
Correct.
games.
Seiya Suzuki. Oh, my oblique. So is this out of an abundance of caution, or are they looking at this and saying, these are actually something we got to be very, very careful with?
Well, obviously, abundance of caution. And obviously, they got to be very, very careful with these guys. Look, Wisdom was probably projected as the opening day third baseman, but they can replace him, right? I mean, they've got some options there compared to the other guys. Suzuki's potentially a big loss. They're expecting a lot out of him this year if he's not ready to go, or if he were to have this as a nagging thing. In other words, if it's a problem, it's a bigger problem if it's him. And Justin Steele, that's close to as big as it gets. He's one of the top 3 starters in the rotation as we sit here now, and a guy with upside. We know what Jameson Taillon brings. We know what Marcus Stroman brings. Steele's the guy that's got ceiling, right? I mean, based on what we've seen so far. So we want to see where that goes. And so these are things you got to be super careful with him at this point. But man, it really drives home the point when you start looking at the rest of the roster, how little margin for error these guys have this year. If this were April, it could mean a significant blow to trying to start the season strong. That's how little margin they have to work with.
Well, so in terms of depth, let's talk about that pitching spot first before we get into Seiya Suzuki and before we get into Wisdom. Let's talk about that rotation. We don't know if Kyle Hendricks is going to be ready to pitch by late May. We don't know that. Maybe he will, and he'll be old Kyle Hendricks. Maybe he won't. You've got Jameson Taillon that you mentioned. You got Marcus Stroman that you mentioned. When you look at the Drew Smyly, so what is the depth here? Hayden Wesneski trying to make the ball club. Last time we spoke, you and I, we thought maybe he starts in Iowa, gets stretched out, and then is the first guy they call up. Maybe he wins a job in camp and he's outstanding.
I'd like to see that, actually. I've told you before, I like that kid. I'd love to see, if they're trying to win like right away, I love that as an impact.
So how much depth do you think they have? How many guys could competently make a start for them if they had to have them?
Look, Jed Hoyer has liked to say over the years, you need like 9 guys to feel good about your depth. 9 guys you could feel give you a major league start, even if they're in the wings at AAA or they're sitting in your bullpen as swing guys. I would say right now they have 7.
Okay, Assad, Sampson.
I don't count Assad.
Okay.
I mean, Assad, he might be fine, but I don't count him as major league depth until he's a bona fide major league pitcher. I do think Wesneski's ahead of him. I do count Wesneski because he arrived at the brink and performed when he got there very consistently. And I'm just there's just something about him. I like him. And then you're talking about Adrian Sampson, right? Who's a journeyman.
Wesneski, Sampson, Steele. Now, again, we've talked that he's got a little bit of a hiccup there. Is 3. Hendricks potentially 4. Taillon, Stroman. So who am I missing?
Did you say Wesneski?
I did.
You said Wesneski and Sampson, Taillon, yep. Stroman, Steele, Smyly, and potentially Hendricks.
Smyly, that would be 7.
And so Hendricks is the guy that, like you said, if they're lucky, that's May. And what you'd love to see is that everybody stays healthy, and then he comes into that mix. And how does he fit? Does he bump somebody to the bullpen, makes the bullpen stronger? he just makes everybody stronger if he can come in healthy and do what he's done in the past. And that's what you don't want to see is you're getting by for 3 weeks because some guy's getting hurt and just biding your time, waiting. When's Hendricks going to get here and backfill that for us? And then maybe he does it, maybe he doesn't, maybe you rush him, maybe you don't, and you lose ground in the meantime. So they're walking a little bit of a tightrope when it comes to their depth all the way around. And actually, they might have a little more of it in the rotation than they have in some areas.
Okay, so let's also talk about Seiya Suzuki. This is a big year for him. Last year was more of an adjustment year, and he did have the hand injury that sidelined him for about a month. But this is year 2 of a big, with posting fee, basically $100 million commitment, $99 million.
Yeah.
Now he has got an oblique strain. I'm hearing it's not serious, but they always tell us it's not serious.
Obliques, always take obliques with a grain of salt. Always assume that that's tricky and could be long lasting, even if it looks minor in the beginning, because it's too easy to aggravate. Your baseball's all core. When you're a hitter, it's all core. Pitcher too. It's way too easy to aggravate, and those are small muscles. So it's serious enough, but I will give you an upside to this, right? So you're looking at it saying he's already got that. But the guy came in, he put on 20 pounds of good weight in the offseason. He's got that year under his belt of the transition to the United States from Japan, and they're expecting more of what he looked like with a strong finish last year than what he looked like when he struggled in the middle of the season. Now, all that said, the WBC was just sort of this thorn in the side of all the great plans, right? Major League Baseball wants teams to promote this. Every team is telling every player, oh, we encourage you to go to the WBC under all circumstances.
Yeah.
None of them want their guys there. None of
them.
And so, and by the way, there was some, the Japanese players in particular, there's a lot of sort of, there's a cultural difference between that and some other places. And so representing your country means a lot more. Sort of playing the public relations game of
the civic pride thing.
Yeah. And so there might even be a little bit of Seiya Suzuki, if not a lot of Seiya Suzuki, that would rather just stay in Cubs camp and get ready for this big league season than go off to WBC. It looks like, regardless of how serious this oblique is, they probably won't chance the WBC. And if that's the case, and it's not all that serious, then he stays in camp, keeps that continuity, doesn't have the travel, doesn't have whatever aggravation there is to that, and then gets ready on the right type of pace to be best prepared for the Cubs season. So there could actually be upside to this if it means he doesn't go play in the WBC.
All right. I've got some other thoughts in, but let's also talk about Wisdom, tightness in his groin. Again, you can come in. I was talking to John Yurkovich, who I work with at ESPN 1000, who played in the NFL. He said, kid, you can get on all the treadmills you want. You can lift all the weights you want in the offseason and feel like, hey, man, I'm in the best shape of my life. He said, there's football shape. There's baseball shape. It's totally different, and you got to break your body down, and then you're ready to play the season. You agree with that?
I think there's some truth to that. I mean, it's really kind of funny because I was thinking of this. Back in the day, they used to tell baseball players all the time, don't lift weights, don't lift weights. It wasn't until the late 70s, early 80s, where even before the steroid era, that players started lifting weights and conditioning in the off season. They didn't want you to get stiff and risk pulling muscles because baseball is such a fluid thing. And what did we find out? We found out as a bunch of bull. But it is kind of funny that the guy that puts on 20 pounds of good weight in the weight room, oblique right out of the chute. And, here's Wisdom. Although, is it possible Wisdom, didn't he make that catch in game 1? He make a leaping catch?
I believe he did. It could have happened there.
Could have happened there. So I don't know. I think there's some truth to that. I think the more basic truth is you get as you play the game, those muscles, you get that, you build that, more recent muscle memory and then you're conditioned for a long season. Well, that's what spring training is supposed to do for you.
Okay, I want to go back to Seiya Suzuki because he invited
Jesus.
him. I invited him. I had this shirt made by our friend Joe Johnson at Obvious Shirts.
He invited Kodai Senga too.
No, he did not, because I made sure that he said, I talked with him or my agent knows him. He never said, I invited him. He has invited Shohei Ohtani to be a Cub. Let's get it done.
He's going to wind up in the same place as the last guy from Japan that he talked to about coming to the Cubs. He's going to wind up with the Mets, or he'll wind up with the Dodgers.
Who was the runner-up for Shohei Ohtani when he signed with the Angels? That'd be the Chicago Cubs.
I don't know, but I don't think it was. I don't think it was even close, because remember, every team was limited in how much they could spend for him, so they were dealing with some disadvantages.
I was told by someone who would know that if there was the DH was in the National League when he made his decision, he would have been a Cub.
That's what I'm saying. That was one of the disadvantages. So I'm saying it wasn't even close. It was a non-starter for that reason, even if he liked the other reasons. And they had less money to spend than the Angels did at the time.
Got the DH now, my friend. We've got the DH, and he invited him. Bam. Let's go.
Hey, you dream all you want, man. That's what February and March are for. You just keep dreaming, Cap. That ain't gonna happen. That ain't gonna happen anymore. By the way, any more than Manny Machado now that he signed that extension with the Padres, and that was never gonna happen.
How about that? $350 million more with another opt-out.
That is friggin' crazy. You know, I was looking at the Padres on this, and they've got 5 guys on their roster right now with 9-figure deals. 2 of them with north of 300 million, and one of them just tore one up to extend at a higher price. That's 5 more 9-figure contracts than the White Sox in big market Chicago have ever had. These guys are spending like crazy. And by the way, now that you've done this, one of the calculuses, right, for how are they going to sign Soto after trading for him last year was that, well, Machado might opt out. Well, now they've jacked Machado's annual salary for an extended period of time. They're still going to go after Soto. Now he's got this year and next year before he's eligible for free agency. They're still going to extend him at some point. They're going to make a serious run at it. They're not done. They're not done spending. And I tell you what, Peter Seidler over there, the owner, he's really aggressive. And he said the other day, I don't care what anybody's saying. You know, Manfred was saying, I don't know if they can sustain this. I don't care what anybody's saying. I want to bring the first parade to San Diego. And man, every fan in baseball whose team isn't there yet should be rooting for the Padres as a model for their owners to follow.
Right. Where their owners go, wow, San Diego did it and they won the flipping World Series. I guess we better start spending more.
Yeah, and it pays off. Hey, I'll throw this. You want to hear one of the most amazing stats? Okay, winter meetings. Scott Boras said San Diego's not a small market team. What do you mean they're not a small market team? He says because in San Diego they're the only major league sports team. So they've got, what do you say, 3 or 4 million people there that for the sports entertainment dollar, it's a captive audience. They got the market corner. Well, all right, fine, whatever. That's spin, right? Except Major League Baseball has been on a downward attendance trend over the past decade or so. You want to know what the Padres are? They recorded their highest attendance last year since the year Petco opened in 2004. Second highest in franchise history. 24% increase, 24.7% increase.
Them trying to win
over 2019, the last year that the numbers are comparable because of the pandemic restrictions. The rest of baseball, 2019 to 2022, the entire league down 2.3%. So don't tell me this is bad economics, or if you're the commissioner, oh boy, we got to start an economic committee and worry about this. No, their fans are turning out and paying bucks to watch this team, and they're making the playoffs. And they finished 3 wins short of the World Series last year. So be nice to see some other ball clubs, hang on to guys and extend them for that kind of length.
Okay, let's talk. By the way, we do have some fan questions. We'll get a few in. One is about extensions with the Cubs. We'll get to that. Let's talk about the rules changes because we're 3 games in as we're recording this. And yesterday on Sunday, we had 1 game end with men on base. The guy wasn't in the box in time. Gotcha. You're out. Game over. So I love it. I've got friends of mine who love it.
You know what they call that, Cap?
Pardon me?
You know what they call that?
What?
It's a clock off win.
I like that. A clock off win. I like that.
I stole it. I read that somewhere.
And I have friends who love it too. But a good friend of mine, he said that his friends are calling him going, I hate this. What's with this pitch clock? What do you think of it?
I love it. I friggin' love it.
So do I.
It's peeling off early results, 25 minutes a game or so, which is about what they said the result was in the minors. And we'll see, regular season, there's going to be some hellacious arguments, which, by the way, I don't mind. All this replay and all this other stuff kind of took the arguments out of the game. I kind of like the arguments. I think every once in a while when there's a good reason for an argument or fans get ticked off, it's kind of nice to see your manager go out there and fight for something. So I think there'll be more of that. And that's, in my mind, that's human element. But in the meantime, man, I'm telling you, watching those games, they move fast. I mean, they move really well. I mean, the White Sox game, when the two Chicago teams played their openers, I was flipping back and forth between the 2 games. White Sox moved really fast. That game was over a half hour before the Cubs, at least. And the Cubs scored a bunch of runs, but I loved it.
Okay, let me ask you this. Gordon Beckham, who I've worked with in my previous job, we both used to work at NBC Sports Chicago, tweeted, concept people are proposing, turn the pitch clock off after the 7th or 8th inning. In theory, this would make sense. But how do you know what the most important inning of the game will be? The game could be in the balance in the top of the 3rd. End of the game isn't always the tipping point.
Well, not only that, why would you change the rules with 3 innings to go? Agreed. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, that's as dumb as the phantom runner in the extra innings. That's a stupid rule. But and by the way, that one drives me nuts. They're going to keep that one, even though they've increased the pace of the game effectively with these other rules. Who cares if you go? I mean, I understand you're saving pitchers and so on and so forth. But people have pitchers in the minors.
Yeah, I don't mind the starting with the man on second. It doesn't bother me as a fan. I love baseball as much as you do.
Yeah. It's just, to me, it's just you've changed the rules within the same game. And I don't like that. But
okay. And now, will they, in the postseason, the clock will still be on, correct?
I believe so.
Okay.
And why shouldn't it be? If you're going to play the whole season with these rules, baseball is about rhythm, especially for the hitter. If the hitter develops a new way of achieving his rhythm and it's quicker, why would you encourage taking longer and elongating the pace and so on?
Can you imagine losing the World Series? Your guy isn't in the box quick enough? Oh my goodness.
It won't happen. I mean, it won't happen from an enforcement standpoint, I don't think, and I don't think it'll happen from a on-field perspective either.
I hope not. Well, so we have the pitch clock. We haven't really seen the bigger bases come into play. I think
nobody's going to be running a lot this early in camp.
No, people grabbing hamstrings, going, "What are you doing?" So,
although Dusty Baker's kid stole a base the other day.
Love it. Darren Baker.
Got a little opposite field hit and then immediately stole second.
It's incredible to think that I would be at press conferences or hosting postgame, throwing to a press conference where Darren Baker's playing with his little Hot Wheels cars while Dusty was trying to answer questions. I cannot believe that guy is a baseball player in an organization.
He's a professional baseball player wearing a Washington Nationals uniform the other day.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and here's a guy who's famous, whose most famous moment on a baseball field was getting scooped up during the World Series.
By JT Snow.
Exactly.
All right. Anything else from the rules changes that you want to discuss before I give you a couple of listener questions?
You know, the Marquee Network. They were my douche of the year last year, tied
Oh,
for my douche of the year last year,
wow.
because they're tough to watch sometimes.
Mhm.
Well, out of the chute, they dropped the ball again. Now they'll probably get better. I mean, they're not going to get worse, but they went out. You got the shift. You want to talk about the rules? You got the shift, right?
Mhm.
So what's the first thing you want to see if you're watching a broadcast?
I want to see what the field looks
I want
like.
to see what it looks like. So they show an angle where they're getting set up for the first pitch, and I see Dansby Swanson moving pretty dramatically towards second, and then they cut to the pitcher's perspective. And then I hear JD say, Nico's on the grass. And I'm thinking, that's illegal. JD's saying that's illegal. And then just before the delivery began, Nico moved on to the dirt. I want to see that. I want to see that initially. So hopefully we get a chance to see a little more of that on the broadcast. But just as far as the rules go, the shifts to me, I mean, the pitch clock to me is kind of this. I'm fine with it as a
Yes.
purist, and it's a no brainer for the pace of play, and I don't think there's any excuse for pitchers and hitters to take as long as they've been taken anyway for the last bunch of years. So I'm fine with that. But it just as far as how it's going to impact the game, it's that shift that fascinates me. I want to see how teams defensively adjust for it to play their metrics and to hide their lesser fielders. And I want to see how it affects guys like Schwarber and Rizzo and Joey Gallo, in their batting averages and their on bases.
So I had Theo on the radio last week, and he said, I want to be part of the group that fixes the sport that I helped to break.
Yeah, exactly. I used to give him crap for that for years. Him and Jed both. You guys are the ones that broke this.
Yeah.
You guys are the problems. They didn't deny it then either.
He said, I did it because I was trying to win in a different job.
No
now
doubt.
I'm trying to
No
fix
doubt.
the game.
I mean, look, when I say that, I say that, I'm talking about the big picture in the forest or the trees, but absolutely. I mean, that was his job, and he arguably did it as well as anybody else at the time, and gamed the system to his benefit. That was his job. Unfortunately, it was incentivized by the larger industry, and it didn't adjust back organically, so they had to do this. I guess it is like it's like when the feds try to come up with a secure computer system, and they hire the hacker.
Correct. It's like the movie Catch Me If You Can.
Yeah.
We're going to hire you to tell us how we screw up, and people can counterfeit money and checks. All right. Before we get out of here, we'll do 3 or 4 of these questions. One, guy called The Educator says, where are we with the Ricketts spending? Cubs did spend some this offseason, but no long-term commitments. Is Hoyer afraid his budget is getting pulled out from under him again, so no long-term deals? I responded to him and said, 7 years for Swanson, Tyone for 4, that they are spending, and they spent $300 million. Did they sign somebody for a 13 or 14-year deal? They did not. But if they have any desires on playing in the deep end of the pool next winter, they're going to have to probably.
Yeah, you and I agree on a lot of this. There's a little overlap in our agreement, but I discount their spending in the offseason just for this reason. They got rid of a lot of guys that would have cost them money to keep, and they really tore it down. And by the time they spent the money they did this past winter, they were down to just a handful of guys you could count on as big league pieces of that roster, and hardly anything on the payroll. So to go spend what they did, most of it was short-term contracts. You got a 7 and a 4-year deal, as you pointed out. Most of it was short-term spending, which is going to come right off the books pretty soon. But all it did was give you a big league roster, is what it boiled down to. So, and as we discussed earlier, not one with a hell of a lot of depth to it. So there's a lot of growth that still has to happen. And the Dansby Swanson signing, of the 4 all-star shortstops that were out there, that was easily by far, Carlos Correa wound up getting 6 years because he failed 2 physicals. So take that for what it's worth. But his original deal was, I believe, a 13-year deal that he had struck with the Giants. So all of them got quite a bit more than Dansby did, and all of them got more total value.
Nick Palazzolo, cool name, says, if Ian Happ or Nico Horner aren't extended this spring training, is there any hope that they will be extended at all? Happ has just this year left. Nico has 3 years left. Do you believe the Cubs are considering in spring training getting either one or both extended? I do not.
I think they're considering both. Look, I think at the end of the day, and it might be at the end of the year, Nico's extended.
I agree. I think Nico gets extended. Could it happen during the season? I guess, but I think it's more likely next fall they get it done.
Could happen anytime. I mean,
right.
If it happens during the season, it could be because he's off to such a great start and he's feeling good about it. They're feeling good about it. And they're looking at what the marketplace is going to look like. Happ is an interesting, he's an interesting case because he's a player rep. He's very involved in the union and what's going on with attempts to keep salaries down. And now there's this new economic committee. He's very aware of that, was part of the negotiations. So he's a businessman. And he sees all this money in the game. And I think as a Gold Glove winner and an all-star, he values himself a certain way. But I think we can probably agree on the outside of that. I mean, and more power to him. He should get whatever he can get. But if you're evaluating him, it's a little trickier than that. He was a very, very streaky player until last year. He's not 24 years old. He's not ancient either. But what kind of length is reasonable for a contract for him? What would he get on the open market? I don't think it's a 9-figure deal. But look what Brandon Nimmo got. So it's much trickier. So I think it's a lot easier to imagine that they're far enough apart that something doesn't happen anytime soon. It could be one of these deals where he goes to free agency and they say, let's stay in touch and see what your market is.
Okay, we have a couple more and then I'll spring you. Jermaine wants to know, Jermaine Jones, does PCA have a chance to make this club? He had a really nice throw yesterday to gun a guy out at second base after running a ball down toward the warning track. And Tyler Smith says, following up on that, do you think Mervis has a chance to make the opening day roster and get immediate ABs? I don't think either guy, unless, oh my goodness, I didn't see them hitting, 480 in spring training. I don't think either guy is here when the season starts.
Well, unless the rest of the outfielders take a bus to go out to dinner and they get in a bus crash.
God forbid.
And it's all minor injuries, but they can't start the season on time. No shot sparkles to PCA.
Yep. Agreed.
And Mervis has an outside chance only because of what he did last year and kind of a need at that position. But a lot of it depends on Hosmer. I don't see it. I don't see any reason why, as this roster stands now, you'd have to include him on opening day. And by the way, he's not on the 40-man. So that's an additional complication. You got to make room for him. And so you got to have a really strong reason. And right now, we've talked about it, right? Vegas says this is a 77.5 win team. And they got to get to opening day fully healthy.
Play the over.
They got to get health. They got to be 100% healthy to even have a shot to believe they can exceed that. And by the way, if they are, it means Hosmer's healthy. It means you're feeling good about other things. And Mervis is a guy just waiting for the first opportunity at Iowa.
All right, Gordon, we'll have more listener questions. You can fire them in at GW Cub or at the Capman. We are here for you anytime there'll be breaking news. We will have a podcast. And of course, we will drop one, at least one, every single week. Gordon, it's a lot of fun hooking up with you, man. There was no arguing this time.
How is that possible, Cap? That's 2 now.
We'll get there.
You'll
say
keep wearing
something
t-shirts
ridiculous.
like that. We'll be there real soon.
Right there. I invited him. Seiya to Shohei. We'll get into that next week. Have a great rest of your day, okay?
All right, you too, man.
There he is, the great Gordon Wittenmyer. I'm David Kaplan. Please hit that subscribe button here on YouTube for the Recap channel. And if you watch your podcast in audio format, it's available anywhere you get your podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Appreciate you greatly. Take that.